Can you hear me?
Gotcha, Paul. How you doing?
Oh, good. Just fine. Am I the first one on here?
No, no, got a few people. People are coming on now, a little slow. We had, our last meeting went a little over. So,
Yeah, I saw the first 3/4 of it. It was great.
that was great.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. We were a little late wrapping up over there. There we go. Okay, we'll just give it a second to get started, and then I'll introduce our presenters.
Yeah, we have, quite a few people still signing on, Sam, so.
Okay. Yep. We'll just stand by.
Howdy,
Hey, Sam,
I'm here.
Jared Weaver, Mr. Jared and his goat in the background to show us what a big goat looks like. Nice.
Say hi, Skylar.
Nice.
Can I hold you again?
Man, I think we could have done that bear seminar for another hour with questions. That was kind of fun.
that's great.
Well, we still having a few more people sign in here. Do you think we're ready, Deb?
We're still signing in.
Okay, we'll give it just another minute or two.
A minute, yeah. As soon as it starts slowing down. I'd say you're probably okay to start, Sam.
Okay, thanks, Deb. Well, with that, welcome everyone to our Mountain Goat Hunting with the Experts seminar. Our experts for the day are Jason Bunch and Register Guides Jason Bunch and Master Guide Paul Claus, and I think Master Guide Fegis is helping out with this one as well. So with that, I will turn it over to, I think Jason's starting, so I'll turn it over to Jason.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Sam. Thanks, everybody, for joining in. I appreciate you guys making this a success. So I'll get started pretty quickly. I've been hunting mountain goats every year for about 24 years. The only year I missed was during 9/11. So I know a little bit, but not everything. I wanted to start out for guys who haven't booked a mountain goat hunt yet or been on a mountain goat hunt and wanted to kind of discuss where do you start? And so that's what I'm going to be talking about. Where do I start when beginning to look into mountain goat hunting services? I would probably challenge you to think about, what do you envision your mountain goat hunt looking like? Is it a backpacking hunt? Do you not care what it looks like? You just want to harvest a goat? Do you want to see the ocean from where you're hunting? Do you not? Do you want to be inland or coastal? Do you want to use a boat to get there? Do you want to be in an airplane to get where you want to go? Do you want to stay in a lodge when you're done with your hunt or before you go to on your hunt? Those are all pretty good questions to ask, and that's going to help you start to look in the right direction for what guide you want to hire services from. Look at guide advertisements that may fit what you want. And then once you do that, start calling those guides and asking the questions that will pinpoint you down to kind of narrow your search. When you're talking to your guides, look for chemistry. Is this guy, are you just going to be hunting with somebody else? Or are you going to be hunting with the guy that you're speaking with? Find chemistry. If you find chemistry, you're probably going to set yourself up for success. And then narrow your questions from there. And so what kind of questions should you be asking? There's a ton of them, but I just jotted down a few here. What type of hunt is this? Maybe you start off by saying, what does your average goat hunt look like from the time I arrive in Alaska to the time I leave Alaska? That's going to really help you focus your discussion. What is the average length of your hunt? 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, 10 days. What can I anticipate for weather? That's going to kind of tell you, that might lead you into, well, it's 7-day hunt, but you're probably going to lose a day or two to weather. So now you're looking at 5 days. How many people will be with you? Does your guide use a packer, or does he expect you to be carrying half a goat? Goats can weigh up to, upwards of 350 to 400 pounds if you're super successful on a big old billy. That's a lot of meat and hide to carry out between two people. So ask those questions. Is this a one-on-one hunt, meaning one guide, one client with packer? Or is this a two-on-one hunt? Is there two guides and a hunter? Or is it maybe 2 hunters and 1 guide? Make sure you clarify that. Do you do out and backs? Do you anticipate setting up a camp up in the bottom and hiking up every day and back down? Or do you anticipate being on top of the mountain and hiking out and then hiking back? Or do you anticipate carrying your pack with you and your camp with you all the time? Those are all good questions to try to help you kind of envision what your hunt's going to look like. How many goats should you anticipate seeing? 5, 30, 50? And understand what success is. We talked about it during our brown bear discussion a little bit. Understand as a hunter or anywhere, your chances of success are 50-50. Either you're going to get something or you're not going to get something. You can ask your hunter, your guide, what his personal success is on that trip, but understand that ultimately it doesn't matter if the guide's success is 100%. There's a chance that he won't be 100% after your hunt. So so when you ask that question about success, take it in stride, I guess is my point. Ask about equipment. What equipment does the guide use? Is he using a Walmart special up there on the mountain when it's blowing 70 miles an hour? Or is he using good quality gear? And do your homework to know what good quality gear is before you ask it. Ask about the gear that you should be responsible for and what gear your guide should be responsible for. And then ask about trophy quality. Trophy quality can be anywhere from hide hair length to horn length to maybe just a good trip in the mountains and everything in between. So make sure that when you talk about trophies, that you and the guide that you're hiring services from are on the same page. Are your expectations what the guide, what the guide provides, is that what your expectation is? If you are asking these questions and you're narrowing down your what guide you're going to hire services from, if you start to see that there might be a split, that's fine. Communicate that with the guide, that maybe what they're offering isn't what you're looking for or anticipating, and continue to search. You can always come back to them. What happens after the hunt? What happens with your hide? What happens with your meat? Make sure you clarify that and you know what you're responsible for. And last, cost. When looking at costs, always ask about hidden cost. What aren't you guys talking about? Whether it be hotel fees or locking tag fees, stuff like that. Just because the hunt costs, say, $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000, doesn't mean that that's all the cost that's associated with your hunt. And that's all I got. Paul, would you like to go?
Am I up?
Sure.
Hello?
Yep.
Who's going next?
You.
Go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, first of all, I got to say, this is really weird. If my dad knew we were sitting out here on the banks of the Chittenden River, the headwaters of the Chittenden River, I'm doing a live event where it's hard to get your mind around. I guess that kind of means old guys. But anyway, my name is Paul Claus. I live and operate in the headwaters of the Chittenden River in the heart of the Wrangell-St. Elias National Park. And my daughters, they tell me I'm starting to look more like a goat every day. You kind of look at the guy in the back there. Yeah, looks a little bit like me, you think? Huh? Anyway, I've been hunting and guiding and photographing and climbing around in goat terrain since I was 10 years old out here. And of all the big game animals in Alaska that are around, that I've been involved with, I've never been more baffled by anything than a goat, both in its family structure, where they live, how they travel, and how to accurately judge them. And I don't know, us old guys, anyway, like to tell stories. So start out by just telling a couple little stories to go along with what I'm saying here. First, the judging them. Years and years ago, I had a German hunter, and just like all hunters, they book a hunt. They want a really big trophy. And so as a goat guide, you're thinking about, all the different things that you've learned over the years. And one of the things is you look for a lone billy, that's if there's a group of goats, family, it's typically not a really big one in there. But anyway, so I found this spot where there was a lone billy, and there was no other goats around. It was all by itself, and there was no other goats for many miles. So yeah, it's got to be a big one. And so we make a stalk on this thing, and we thought 500 yards, and thinking back on it now, this is before range finders and that, so we didn't know for sure, but it was too far to shoot. And one of the other criteria, it was laying in a bad spot. If it had shot it there, it would have fallen, we probably couldn't have got it. And that's a common thing with goats. But anyway, finally, we weren't in a big hurry and everything. And we looked at this and we discussed it. This is a big goat. Yeah, it's a lone billy. All the horns, length of horns above its ears, and a little bit yellow hide. And, for sure it's billy, and it's a big one. And then luckily, towards the end of the day, it starts coming towards us. And it got within shooting range, and we shoot it, and he shot it. I start walking up to it, and I got about 20 yards from it, and I'm going, uh-oh. Anyway, turned out to be one of the smallest goats I've ever taken, and luckily it had a real nice hide, but it was a 3-year-old billy, and I was totally dumbfounded. I was just like, and we had all day to look at it. anyway, that's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum, another time we were in 12 goats. Well, I've never seen 12 billies together, and I don't think I've ever since seen 12 billies together, but same thing. We had lots of time. We spent all day watching them. And the criteria, finally, I was second guessing myself. Well, maybe they're all nannies, or, but no, they're not nannies. I can see things on them, okay. And so finally we decided to shoot. They all look the same. The horn length, everything, body size, they were all full mature goats. And so we decided to shoot the one that wasn't going to fall somewhere, and he was looking away from us. And I told the client if he spined him right there, he'd probably stay right where he was at, and which he did. Anyway, it was one of the biggest goats we've ever taken. It was 53, I think, or something like that. And so those are just to give you an idea how goats are. Anybody says they can accurately always judge goats. The terrain that we hunt in out here is oftentimes just rocks. There's no bushes, or very few. And so things to judge the size of an animal, it's hard to see. But anyway, where they live, goats, that's, I guess what makes goat hunting fun, at least for me. I love mountains and I love climbing around on them. So, but they live in crazy places. They like to lay right on the edge of places. They may not be too hard to get to within shooting range on a goat, but then it might fall where you don't want it to go. Their family structure is really weird. And I know the biologists here in Alaska have puzzled over them. And I live in a very unique area here. This is one of the only places in Alaska where there's sheep and goats right side by side together. I've actually watched them lie down together, which used to be the biologist said didn't happen, but I've seen it. But their family structure is really unique. They I don't know, it seems in a lot of ways they're a lot more like humans. They're very emotional, maybe. If you shoot a goat in a spot in a bunch of goats there, oftentimes they won't come back to that spot for many years. And travel, the goats are they will go wherever they want to. I used to pride myself in my younger days that I could go anywhere a sheep would go, but I can't go where a goat will go. And I would venture to say nobody can go where a goat can go, because they're crazy. They'll go on things, where even technical climbers couldn't get there with rope and stuff. But they're a great animal to hunt. It's a lot. They're a ton of fun. They'll travel. I've seen them in the middle of the Bagley ice field, walking across the ice field. I've seen them in the middle of the 5 mile wide flat glacial Chitina River Valley, standing in the middle of the river. They go all over the place. So like I say, that makes them fun. Let's touch a little bit about safety. Viper's on there. We had a guide a mutual guide. He guided for me first, then he worked for Sam, but maybe he'll tell about it. But safety with goat hunting is a key. It's really easy to get thinking about the hunt and the goat and not realizing where you're going. And you should never go in terrain to hunt a goat where you wouldn't go if the goat wasn't there. So anyway, that's a really thing. And so I'll just kind of going on here, but equipment. I'm just going to say one of the key thing for me, the equipment is boots. And I've been a big proponent of, mountaineering boots, plastic mountaineering boots. They're kind of the standby or standard now, but used to be, I was one of the only ones that was using, because I was a climber to start with, and it so helped in the terrain. So the very first, most necessary piece of equipment is good boots. And then briefly, physical condition. A goat hunt, unlike maybe brown bear hunting, where you get to sit in glass for hours and hours, you got to get to where the goats are at. And oftentimes that's pretty rugged stuff, at least out our way. And so the better condition you are, the more chances you're going to have. And I've said about enough. Your turn there, Viper.
Good job, Paul. Well, my name is Sam Fegis. I've been guiding pretty much all over the state, but I've primarily been guiding in Cordova for about 40 years. Taken hundreds of goats. My clients have, and my crew and myself. I do lots of goat surveys, hundreds of hours of goat surveys for the state. So I'm pretty much familiar with goats. Cordova is a great place for goats. One thing I was going to add to Paul, with the plastic boots, it's very important to have the crampons. It's mandatory for all my clients in my area because of the wetness and the moss and the slipness, the wet vegetation, to have crampons with every client and guide. And sometimes the guide will have a backup set too, because sometimes the client will lose it. One thing I wanted to add, a lot of people don't know this, most of the guides do, but goat hunting is probably one of the most dangerous animals in North America to hunt. More people are killed or hurt hunting goats than any other animal in North America. People think, well, maybe it's the bear. No, it's the goat. It takes fatality every year in Alaska, if you look back. What I'm going to primarily cover today is judging of trophies. When I set up a camp or I go hunting goats, I look for an area, the goats travel, but I look for goats, period. And so normally your nannies and kits are down low 90% of the time, and your billies are up higher or across the valley watching the nannies and kits, or they're by themselves. My experience on larger billies, they're by themselves. Most of the time you'll see them in 2s and 3s. I've seen them as many as 6, but not as many as Paul's has, okay? But I do see them in groups. When you're looking for billies, the older billies have a tendency in my area to be yellow. The yellower the billy, the bigger the billy, is my thing that I train all my guides at. Some of the details for judging goats that I look for is thickness in the horn. Where a nanny's horns are much thinner. I don't know if you can see this. Let's see if we can see this. This is a nanny's horns. Can everybody see that? Yeah, okay. And this is a billy's horns. They're much thicker, as you can see. This is nanny. That's a billy. What I look for in the billies is pretty much the thickness of the base, the glands, enlarged glands, less space between both horns. Pretty much on your, the way I teach my guides, and I've taught myself over the years, immature billy is a billy that's probably, in my class, and the way I look at it, is 8.5 or less. When they start reaching 9 inches, the horns will start curving in on a billy, where the nannies will go straight back. Sometimes they'll flare out, sometimes they'll flare in. Length of the horns, a nanny can be longer than a billy, where a billy, I've hunted hundreds of goats, and I've probably taken a couple in an 11-inch class. Most of them are like, a big billy in my area is 10 inches or a little bit better. And a goat that we strive for is 9 inches. We don't like to shoot anything under 9. It's 9 or better. But when they start reaching 9, they'll start curving in, the horns will. Let's see what else I need to cover here. The body size. If you got billies together, normally, looking at, say you got a nanny and a billy, the billy is normally stockier, much stockier, pronounced hump, the goatee, the Paul goatee, and the Sam Rohr goatee is longer. they have a lot of times, and it's not always the case, they always have like a dirt spot on the rump because that's the way they like their lay. And I've seen big billies that are pure white. So you don't see the dirt. Sometimes it's a terrain, maybe like in Paul's area where they have lots of rocks, for example, they might not be as dirty on their rear as my goats are, because they're always laying in wet vegetation, soiled material, less rocks. I mean, don't get me wrong, we have rocks at my place. Let's see what else. Another way you can tell a difference between a billy and a nanny is like when they urinate. A billy will stretch out, a nanny will squat. So, and sometimes you can see the testicles on a billy, not too often. Let's see. That's pretty much, if you guys want to add something to it, you guys hunt a lot of goats too. Jason? Hello?
You know what I find interesting talking to, hearing you guys, and Sam, I've guided over there for you and seen your area, is how different a lot of the goat areas are around the state. I mean, if you look at Kodiak and you try to compare it to Cordova, they really are night and day. I mean, yeah, they're white critters up on the mountainscape, right? But barring that, they're very different country, and they're very different hunts. I think that's pretty interesting. Like you guys spoke to plastic boots. In your country, I absolutely see why you guys would decide to go with plastic boots. But unlike on Kodiak, I would never even dream of going with, to plastic boots. I thought that's pretty interesting. And Paul, talked about seeing 10 or 12 billies together. And that doesn't happen very often in you guys' neck of the woods, even though you guys have really quite awesome goat hunting. That's pretty common here in Kodiak, right? To see a lot of billies together. Typically though, they're, a lot of 3-year-olds, maybe a 4-year-old or 2, and then maybe 3 or 4 goats over 5 years of age. Not all, goats over 5 years of age and 300 pounds. But so yeah, I think that it's interesting hearing you guys' point of view. I could really take a lot away from looking at the differences between the geographic regions.
Jason, no, sorry, Jason. One thing I'd like to add is, there's a lot of ways that as a client's booking with a guide, if he wants to know more about the species, our Alaska Fish and Game offers so much information for a client to research. They can go online, Alaska Fish and Game, click on hunting, and it has sections for all the species in Alaska. They can click on mountain goat. They can take a mountain goat test. Or you can, once you arrive, a lot of times our biologists will give a book out like this. It's called Everything to Know About Goats. And it will help you learn what your guide's trying to find, the difference, the worst thing a guide could do is shoot a nanny, because most areas you lose a permit, and the guide will lose a goat permit in that area. So in our area down there, you shoot a nanny, you lose a permit. Not the guide, but there's like maybe 20 permits in a certain area. They'll lose, if they shoot a nanny, they'll lose 2 instead of 1. So it's important that the guide shoots the right sex and the right animal.
And I think that's pretty interesting too. And again, it just goes to show the differences in geographic areas, because on Kodiak, on the south end, we would like to see some nannies harvested. So it's pretty interesting. I don't know. I think if I was looking into goats, I think it'd be really fun to, chat with you guys. And then the next day, chat with a couple of Kodiak guys and see the difference. And I mean, there's goats in other areas of the state that we're not even representing during this, in this discussion. I don't particularly know too much about goats in any other areas other than Cordova and Kodiak. So yeah, thanks for sharing all that. It's pretty fun.
I think one of the biggest things is, you hear me?
Yep.
You can hear it. Go ahead.
one of the biggest things is the terrain, which separates the difference. You know, it's all these different areas we're talking about have distinctly different types of terrain where the goats hang out. And that, you know, it's one of the reasons that the state of Alaska has made, you know, goats a necessary animal to hire a guide, because, you know, somebody doesn't know what they're doing. Like Sam said, you're gonna get in big trouble. There's, like you said, every single year people get in real bad trouble hunting goats.
One thing I always emphasize to my guides, and I've learned this myself personally, is I always go to the goat. Once I go to the goat, I always go back the same way. I've got myself in more trouble trying
Yeah.
and going a shorter way because maybe it's getting darker. Hey, we can go. I know we can make it down here, but you really can't. I mean, I've lost a day myself trying to get myself off a cliff. So that's pretty
Hey,
much.
You're not gonna tell the Scott story, Sam?
Well, I did have a guide. It's kind of a, yeah, I guess I could tell it.
You
Do we
better
got-
tell it.
We got time?
It brings it to real life.
Okay. It was when I was first starting, probably the first 10 years of my operation. And I was landing some of my assistant guide, I landed him up on the ice, and there was a big rock pilliard out there, and it was pretty high. It was probably above the ice. It was probably a couple thousand feet, you know, at the most, and lots of goats there. And so I figured it was a 2-day hunt, you know, 2 to 3 at the most. And sure enough, I drop them off, beautiful day on the ice, and the weather comes in, and I was able to get over there 2 days later. And I flew over, and it was a sunny day, and I flew over, and I looked down, and there's SOS on the ice, and this guy is running out of his tent, waving his arms. And so I land, and I said, "Jules, what's going on?" "Scott's dead. Scott's dead. Scott's dead." I said, calm down, calm down. This guy's a doctor too, you know. He looks like he went through hell for 3 days, you know. His eyes were dilated. And I said, "Tell me what happened. Let's go get your gear, and then show me where he's at." You know, so I just grabbed his pack and his light pack and threw it in the airplane because I could get his stuff later. But I wanted to find out where Scott was at. And I said, "Are you sure he's dead?" He says, he went down after the goat, never came back. So he basically, I got him in the airplane, and he's like screaming and everything else. I said, calm down, calm down. We took off, and I said, "Where at?" He says, "Over there on the other side of the bowl." And I flew around the bowl. And I said, "Whereabouts?" He said, "Well, the goat rolled down there." And I said, "You didn't go down and help him?" He said, "No, it was too steep." I said, "Okay." Well, we all know what Scott was like, right, Paul? He's pretty fearless. Well, Scott went down there, and he got in some hard shell, and he slipped, and he fell probably a couple hundred feet. He landed on his pack. Oh, I'll back up a little bit. So I had Joel, and I'm flying around this bowl, and I said, "Where's Scott? Where's Scott?" He said, "I know he's probably at the bottom of that canyon." And I get down lower and lower, and I circle and circle, and all of a sudden I see this arm come up. So I knew he was alive. I took Joel back to the lodge, basically grabbed one of my other guides, said, "Get your sleeping bag. I'm going to drop you off on the ice. We need to go get Scott," you know. And I shuttled about 3 different people lower on the glacier where he was closer to access him. I went back, and they were going up there, and they got up there right at dark. And my brother got on the radio, and he says, he's in real bad shape, Sam. He says, "You better get some help." So I flew back to the lodge, and we had a phone system then, and I called the trooper called the Coast Guard. I'm surprised Jason wasn't there. Jason went, the Coast Guard basically got there at 11 o'clock at night. Of all times, my generator went out, so I had no lights. It was storming, it was raining, but the Coast Guard found me by my longitude, latitude. They said, "Is Mr. Featus here?" And I said, "Yeah, right here." And the helicopter's still running. One guy grabbed me from the lodge, took me in the helicopter, put me in the jump seat, went up there. And that's when, before I seen GPS, and they dialed at 350 feet, and this big colored map lit up, and I was so amazed at it, you know, because I never seen anything like it. And they said, "Where is he?" And he says, up there by that mountain area up there, and they zoom it in, and they started heading up there 350 feet above the terrain, and gets all the way up into this glacier area. And all of a sudden, I said, it's right there in that canyon someplace. And they had some lights on. He says, okay, flip the lights on. Or he said something to the co-pilot, and it lit it up like it was daylight. It was so bright. And my guys, they didn't know what was going on. And they said, if it ever looked like a alien invasion, that's what it looked like. It lit up. They couldn't see nothing. It was so bright, you know. And so he said that we couldn't lower we seen where they were, and they couldn't lower the sling down there. I mean, they couldn't land a helicopter, so they lowered this thing down there, and they brought Scott up. Didn't recognize him. He had busted his jawbones. He busted his ribs. Yeah, I think he fractured his arm. But he was real close to going into hypothermia. He was going into shock. So we got him just in time. So every time I seen Scott as he grew up, he always, you know, as he got older and had kids, he says, yeah, this is a guy that saved my life. He would tell his kids, you know. But goat hunting is really dangerous. That's what Paul and I wanted to tell you. It's really dangerous.
Thanks for that, Sam. You know, if you guys don't have anything else, I'd be interested to see if there's any questions for us or you guys from the audience. No questions. Man, you must have done a good job.
Yeah, just to remind folks, if you're calling in on your phone, I think it's *6 to unmute it so you can ask questions. You can put something in the chat box or just raise your hand on the screen if you have your camera turned on, and we can call on you.
I just got to say, if you're bidding on one of the goat hunts, that it's not dangerous. You're going with good guides.
It can be. It can be.
Just
right.
trust
If
your
you don't have the
guide.
right guide.
A good
Hey,
guide.
Sam, could I ask something really quick?
Sure.
And it's not really a question, but we've got, you know, Jason Bunch is on here, retired Coast Guard swimmer. He's on Kodiak. He's been on a lot of these rescues for some of these guys. Jason, do you have any advice for guys when they get out in the field? I know the guide and the outfitter is supposed to know what to do in case of an emergency, but what if your guide falls and he's out and he hasn't told his client what to expect out there? What should they do, and what should they be prepared for? Not even just a goat hunt, but just a hunt in general in Alaska.
Sure. No, Cabot, that's a great discussion point, especially when you're talking about any hunting really in Alaska if it's remote. So, you know, I would challenge the train of thought that if you can't communicate that you're in distress, then you're not really in distress. So, you know, if the guide has a sat phone on him, but he uses Global Star, you know, are you going to get enough? Are you going to get enough reception that you're going to be able to communicate a distress? If the guide has a DeLorme on him and he falls off the mountain, does the hunter have a mechanism to signal distress, right? To communicate distress. So, you know, a lot of people, you know, back before we had DeLormes, that changed the game, I think, for a lot of us. I think a lot of us would agree. The guide would have a sat phone on him, and that was it. And so then these little mini 406s came onto the market, right? After the 121.5 PLBs went away, the mini 406 came along. Anyone could buy it. It's a couple $100. And so we started putting those in our hunter's pack. So if I fell off the hill, the hunter could at least transmit distress with the 406. And now, fast forward, we have DeLormes and hunters have DeLormes. And so I would challenge all guides to have it at a minimum of 406 that you could slide in your hunter's pack for just that scenario that Sam just discussed. A 406 transmits directly to the 406 devices that strictly transmit. They transmit directly via the DoD's Star Wars satellite system. And so like for Alaska, Elmendorf Air Force Base will get that transmission first. they'll get it within about 3 minutes. Within 7 minutes, they've already figured out your lat and long, who the 406 was registered to. They've already contacted the emergency number that's registered with that 406, and then they've already made the phone call to that number to say, hey, do you know where the Jay is? See if it was mine, and confirmed that I'm actually in the field. The Coast Guard probably launches on about Alaska wide. I would venture to guess over probably 100 false 406 signals a year at a minimum between Sitka and Kodiak. And so having those 406s registered and being able to communicate that, yeah, that thing is actually in the field and being utilized is a big step and kind of making the process quicker for establishing response. So yeah, that's what I would do, if that answers that question.
One thing that I always add with my guides and myself is nowadays it's so much easier to have backup emergency communication. We got the Iridiums, we got the sat phones, aircraft radios. A lot of times are VHF. But I also train, and before the hunt starts, I'll take if I get into camp, I'll say, here's what I got for emergency equipment. We got the aircraft radio, we got my what do you call it, sat phone, or we got the DeLorean. I says, this is how you use it. It doesn't take long. You can do it. You can explain all the stuff in 1 minute. And I even train my packers the same way. If I'm out with a packer and something happens to me, and the client go berserk, he has to be able to communicate to. Everybody in the group has to know the communication process. And
those DeLormes
go ahead.
The DeLormes are so great. They're so light and they last. This is a good antidote for the ending here, but I was taking pictures of goats just a few days ago, and a DeLorme blew out of my coat pocket. And it is still transmitting, luckily not sending a bad signal, but it's transmitting up at about the 3,500 foot level in Canyon Creek, if anybody wants to go look for it. Anyway.
That brings up a good point too with communication is, it's just because you have a sat phone doesn't mean you have a number to actually call. And what number do you call? Do you call your wife back in town and freak her out? Or do you have a telephone number directly to those who are going to be responsible for coordinating a assistance? So as guides go in the field, I would challenge them to look at what what they have to communicate with and know how to use it, know the telephone numbers or the text numbers or even the emergency frequencies to use, and know who's going to come get them.
I even had a guide 2 years ago. I had a call from the troopers. He says, hey, we're getting an emergency message from somebody that has a DeLorean up there in a certain area. You have a guide up there? I said, yeah. And he says, do you want me to send the Coast Guard? And I said, no, I'll go up there and fly and check it out. And, the guide accidentally bumped it. I don't know how you flip that switch off and hit it, but he did it. And I flew over him. He had an aircraft radio, and I said, hey, everything good? And he said, yeah, why? I said, well, the Coast Guard's about ready to come and pick you out of here. So, they can have them, but they got to know how to use them.
Okay, so you guys are talking about what happens when everything goes bad, but how about when things go right? So we got a question from Mitch over here. His question is, what kind of ranges are most of your client shots on goats? So talk just a little bit about distances. Well,
I have a rule of thumb with my guides. We don't like to shoot over 200 yards. We look for, you got your billy picked out, and that's what we strive for. You try to get a side angle, puncture both lungs. And, caliber wise, we use, I have used 270s. They're pretty light. I've lost goats at 270s, hit 3 times and went over a cliff, and direct hits. So we like to have something a little bit bigger most of the time, like a 300 or bigger. And some people think that's an overkill, but I don't. What's your thoughts, Jake? Or Paul?
Yeah, I agree with you as far, the closer the better, for lots of reasons. When you're too far away, you can't really tell maybe what's